Oh dear, I thought I was going to be able to say this is the first time I've preached with bubbles going across in front of me, but thank you, Andrew, for stopping them. This is Father's Day, and so our theme is the perfect father. And there are many passages, obviously, that we could read. I'm going to read a little bit from Romans chapter 8, one of the greatest chapters in the Bible. Well, they're all good, but this is especially good. Then we'll be looking at some other passages. In fact, somewhere over there I've left my little pack of cards. Can you sort that out, Gwen, please, and give it to Paul for Paul to take round? So take a card, any card, everybody. They're all the same, in fact. But that will give you some other Bible passages and the outline of what we're going to be looking at. But anyhow, I'll resist the temptation. Time is going on. We cannot read the whole of Romans 8. So I'm going to read a few verses, a sort of selection of verses from Romans 8. And I'm going to start off with a bit breaking in right into a sentence in verse 14. Paul is speaking here what God has done. There's no condemnation. God has set us free. He's forgiven us, and he's made us his children. And so he picks it up in verse 14. Those who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. For you did not receive a spirit that makes you a slave again to fear. We once were slaves to fear, slaves to all sorts of things. But no, you haven't got that anymore. But you have received the spirit of sonship. And by him we cry, Abba, Father, that lovely daddy word. Daddy, Father. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. He is our Father. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. And if we're children, then we're heirs, joint heirs with Christ. And God has all sorts of things in store for us. Verse 28, for instance, he makes sure that all things work together for good. All things work together for good. And then a little bit later on, he says, if God is for us, who shall be against us? He didn't spare his only Son, but gave him up for us all. How will he not also, along with him, give us graciously all things? For I am convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor demons, nor the present, nor the future, nor any powers, nor height or depth, or anything else in the whole of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. So, the perfect Father. This is our Father. And we all know about fatherhood. We all had fathers. Some of us had bad fathers. Some of us maybe didn't even know our father. Maybe we did know our father, but we wish we didn't know our father. Some of us had good fathers, and we thank God, for somebody who loved us and cared for us and set us a great example and spent time with us. And that's my father. Some of us had kind of in-between fathers. Fathers who had good sides and not so good sides. And those of us who are fathers, I suppose most of us would say, we fall into that kind of category. We're pretty good in some areas, but we ain't so good in others. We've got our strong points, very good at playing football with the kids, but we've got our weak points as well. We get a bit mad with them from time to time, and don't spend enough time with them, whatever it may be. So we're all aware that even the best of us are not perfect fathers. But our theme this morning is the perfect father, the one who has no flaws, who doesn't make any mistakes, who doesn't blow it. The perfect Father, our God. Paul says in Ephesians 3, verse 14, he says, I pray to the Father from whom all fatherhood on earth is named. And he's kind of saying there, look, he's the real thing. The rest of us are kind of imitation fathers. The rest of us are sort of trying to live up to his standard. That's real fatherhood. And everything else is but a pale copy, even the best of us. He's the model for fatherhood. He is the perfect father. And anybody who is willing to let him be their father can know the perfect father, can have this father, my God, my Father. Well, I've picked out 3 Bible passages besides that one from Romans 8, which we'll pop back to once or twice. And the first one is the best known, I suppose, in the whole Bible. The best known time that God is called Father. Our Father who art in heaven, or Our Father in heaven in the New International Version. The first phrase of the Lord's Prayer. And it's such a contrast, isn't it? Such a balance. Because the first 2 words are so kind of close, they're so kind of intimate. That the word Father there, it reflects the word that we read in Romans 8, Abba, Father. It blew the disciples' minds. Nobody had ever called God Dad before. Daddy. The kind of affectionate, close, intimate word. Jesus says, that's how you should look on God. That close, that real, that you're not scared, you don't stand on ceremony, you Dad. He prayed that way, and he said, I want you to pray that way. And then it's emphasized in this first phrase of the Lord's Prayer, because it's our Father. Ours, mine, my Father. That's my Dad. Yeah, there are lots of dads. All the dads playing football or watching the kids in their sports day or something. But that's my Dad. The owning of it, the reality of it. He's mine. He means so much to me. My Father, our Father. So close, so personal, so real, so intimate. And then, in heaven. And as I say, it's so right, that the balance is so beautiful. But because, we've got to realize that this one who is so close, who is so near, is so great and so mighty and so glorious. If we just had the might and the glorious and the power and the heavenly bit, we might think, oh, well, he's too big for me, he's too remote. So we need the intimate bit, and that comes first. But we need to know that this is no kind of little God. This is no kind of weak, fatherly figure, soft and wet. This is the Almighty God. This is the creator of the heaven and the earth. This is the one who sits upon the throne of the universe. This is the one who flings stars into space. This is the one who has eternal resources. This is the one who is wise and good and true and faithful, utterly trustworthy. I got a Dad. And he's King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's on the throne of the universe. He's great. He's majestic. He's glorious. He's fantastic. What a Father. Our Father in heaven. That's your Dad. You can trust him. You can be proud of him. You can make sure that he's proud of you too. And he says, that's my son, that's my boy, that's my girl. Our Father in heaven. The Father, the perfect Father who's in heaven. Number two. Passage there from 1 John chapter 3. I've abbreviated the passage slightly. Let me read the first 3 verses of 1 John chapter 3. Suddenly, in the middle of his letter, John kind of bursts out. A bit like Paul, you know, every now and then Paul gets so excited when he's writing a letter, and maybe he's chained to a Roman soldier, maybe he's in a dungeon and it's dirty and damp and smelly, but suddenly he bursts out because God is so great and God is... And John does just the same thing in this letter here. He says, how fantastic, how great is the love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. And that is what we are. It's not just that we're called it. We are children of God. The reason the world does not know us is that it didn't know him. Dear friends, now we are children of God. And what we will be. I mean, that's fantastic enough. But there's even more in store. What we will be has not yet been made known. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him. We'll be like our dad. When he appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Everyone who has this hope in him purifies himself just as he is pure. Some people become fathers by mistake, accident. They never intended it to happen, but suddenly there's a pregnancy on the way. And maybe they don't like that. Maybe they reject what's happening. I never intended her to get pregnant. And tragically, they may reject the child, and the results might be horrible, horrific. Some fathers, like in a second marriage perhaps, they become a stepfather. They want to marry the woman, but she's got kids. I don't want them. I want her, not them. Others, they long for a child. You know. And right from the moment of conception, they love that child. And it's my child, and it's beginning to be formed in the womb, and just lavish love upon that child. Others, in another situation, the child is a mistake. To be quite honest, never tell a child that it was a mistake. But you know, no, we didn't intend to get pregnant. And yes, I'm marrying somebody who's already got kids, and I wish they didn't have kids. But I'm going to love that child that I never intended to produce. I'm going to love those kids that aren't really my kids, but they're going to become my stepchildren. And that person, in a sense, lavishes more love upon the unwanted, in inverted commas, child. You hear what I'm saying? You see, it's a bad start, isn't it? It's a messy situation. We didn't really want this kid. But from a bad start, this guy, instead of rejecting, chooses to lavish love, even more love than the father who's always wanted a kid, and it's easy for him to love that kid. And that's how it is, isn't it? With God, because as far as us and God is concerned, there's a messy start. There's a bad beginning. It was all kind of spoiled, not by him, but by us. We, like the prodigal son, we'd kind of given up on him and gone away from him, and we'd blown it, and we'd made the mess. And God had every right to sort of turn around and say, well, I don't want you. I'm not interested in you. And yet, says John, he has lavished love upon us. When we blew it and made a mess and made a bad start, he has poured out love on us to say, you're my child. See? What love, how fantastic is the love of God, the love of the Father. that he's lavished upon us, that we should be called and actually be children of God. So he's loved us, he's lavished, forgiving and accepting and love and so many other things upon us. That passage in Romans, it talks about the things that he's done. He's in the early verses talk about the Spirit. He's poured the Spirit into his heart. It's the Spirit of sonship, that the very presence and the grace and the glory of God and the power of God, holding nothing back from us. And then a little bit later on, Paul says in Romans 8, he says, well, he's given us his Son. He's yielded him up for us on the cross. He gave his life, his lifeblood. The living God died for us, so that we might be forgiven and be made his children. And he who did not spare his only Son, but yielded him up for us all, how will he not also together with him give us all things, everything? This is the God who loves, the Father who loves and who gives. His generosity, his grace, his mercy. He does not hold anything back that we might ever need. Maybe you had a bad father. Maybe you didn't get very much, a deprived kind of situation. Here is a perfect Father who gives you everything you need. And then John goes on and he says, and there's something else about this Father. Maybe it is a case of being adopted. Now, normally speaking, if it's the real kid, the natural kid, sooner or later he or she will look like Dad, or have certain characteristics like Dad. Fair enough. But an adopted child isn't going to sort of look like Dad, isn't going to have the characteristics of Dad, because there's no blood link. Or could it sometimes happen that an adopted child, even though there's no blood link, because there's such a close relation between that adopted child and the parent, the father, gradually that kid begins to do things like Dad does, begins to develop habits like Dad. They always used to say to me, you tie up your shoes just like your grandfather used to tie up his shoes. Now, I don't know, I never watched my grandfather. My grandfather died before I was born. But there's just something about it. Okay? Sooner or later, maybe something of the father, even though there was a bad start, a messy start, and so on, the father begins to come out in the kid. That's what John says. He says, well, we don't know all the future, but we know one day when we see him, we'll be like him. We will be like God. Yeah. We'll be like God. The beauty and the majesty and the glory and the power and the loveliness and the goodness and the truth and the wholesomeness of God. The completeness, what God is. Somehow, because we're children of God, will kind of rub off in us. And when we see him, we'll be like him, the perfect Father. Hey, that's exciting, isn't it? What a prospect. Got to get on number 3 quick. Number 3, what sort of picture have I been painting of God? Have I been painting a picture of a God who's a bit soft and a bit wet? Gives us everything we want? Oh, I said that, didn't I? Yeah? Preacher stood up on Sunday morning and he said, God gives us... No, I didn't. I said he gives us everything we need. And I think we need to remember that the perfect Father is the Father who sometimes says no. We've all been in the supermarket, haven't we? And we watch this single mum or single dad, perhaps, or maybe, I don't know, married, whatever, going around with little Adolphus, whoever it is, and little Adolphus says, "Can I have one of them, please? Let me have one of them. I want Mars bar, I want Mars bar." And we watch the mum give way. And everything the kid wants, he gets. And we say, oh no, it's not right. By the time he's 40, his teeth will have dropped out. But not just that. It's just the principle, isn't it? That a child should never, ever get everything that it wants. If a child always gets everything it wants, what kind of kid is it going to be? What kind of human, grown-up person is it going to be? It's going to be a disaster. The perfect father has to say no. And those of us who are fathers have had plenty of opportunities to say no, and those of us who are children, thank God for the times when our parents said no. Well, for some of the times, at any rate. And so we come to that incredibly profound verse from the story of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Praying, sweating, drops of blood, praying before the awfulness of the cross and saying, Father, let this cup pass from me. Abba, he's using that word, Abba, Father, Dad, I love you and you love me, and I'm in this closest of relationships with you, and let this cup pass from me. I can't take it. And the Father said no. The perfect Father, the Father who says no. It's very hard for us to hear and accept no from our perfect Father. It's easier when we watch somebody else. When we see the kid in the supermarket and we say, yeah, that's right. The parent should say no. But when it's us, when we've set our heart on something, and we're praying for it earnestly, we get all our friends to pray for us as well. Oh, God, I want this. God, give me this. God, another Mars bar. God, whatever it may be. It's very hard. It's very hard for us to say what Jesus said. Not what I want, but you want. And if you say no, then I'll take it. I'll accept it. I'll say, okay. It's very hard. Hard when we're in pain and we ask for the pain to go away. Hard when we're praying for a loved one who's desperately ill. Hard when we set our heart on a job. I mean, it's just right. Oh, God, get me through this interview. God, I want this job. Hard when there's something, some possibility before us. Oh, wouldn't it be fantastic? Yeah, God, it must be right. It's good, surely. Let's go for it, God. Come on. Hard when he says no. And you see, there's two kind of angles on the no bit. Some things he says no because it would cause our teeth to fall out by the time we're 40. Because what we're asking for is not right. Or maybe it's not the best. It might be okay in a sense, but we're desperate to get that job, but God has got another job lined up six months ahead, which would be even better. And so God has to say no, etc., etc. So sometimes he says no, and there's kind of a very good reason behind it. I tell you also, though, that sometimes he says no, and we certainly can't see the reason, and maybe there isn't a reason. Maybe it isn't the case where if he said yes, it would be harmful. But it's just the kind of foundational principle that if we get yes every time, if we always get what we ask for, even if everything that we ask for is good, then our characters will never develop. Then we will never grow. We will never grow in obedience, in faith, in trust. We never get any backbone. We'll just be weak, wimpy Christians with a God. God, do this for me, please, and that, please, and the other. Yes, God, that's what you're there for. No. We've got to get out of that frame of mind. That's so stupid, so immature. so many people who've got a wrong idea of God. They just think God is like a toy to do what they want. But God isn't like that. We've got to learn that this is a great God, a glorious God before whom we bow, before whom we worship. This is God that we're dealing with. And so sometimes God will say no, even when yes wouldn't have been wrong, wouldn't have been particularly sinful, but because we need that little Anna, one of our grandchildren down in France. She's going through this kind of rebellious stage, which starts around about 6 months and goes on to the end of teenage, probably. But she likes to test her parents. Of course, they all do. And then she likes to push them and see how far she can go and get away with it. And she's at the meal table, for instance, and she's got something and she's had enough and she doesn't want any more. And so she'll kind of catch her dad's eye and she'll make us that she's going to throw it on the floor. And Pete says, no, Anna. And then she kind of catches her dad's eye again and twinkles a little bit and moves her hand over a little bit further. No, Anna. A little bit further still. No, Anna. Okay. Now, nobody cares. I mean, her sister's already thrown 3/4 of her dinner down on the floor. And it doesn't matter. A little bit of extra stuff on the floor is nothing either way. But no, that kid's got to learn something. And her father is right to say no. And she's got to learn that her father has a right to say no, whether she understands it or not, whether it's profitable or unprofitable, whether, etc. You hear what I'm saying? God, I accept that you've got the right sometimes, because you are a perfect father, to say no. So I've got 2 questions at the end there. Where is my perfect father saying no in my life? Because if he's a perfect father, he will be saying no. Now, he may be saying no in some area of our life that, no, Peter, that is wrong, that is sinful. No, that's going to destroy you. That's evil. He may be pointing at something in our life, and he says no to that. And we've got to hear his voice, and we've got to hear his voice. And we've got to say, okay, Lord, then it's got to go. But he may be pointing at something in our life that isn't bad in itself. He may be pointing at something in our life that why no to that, Lord? Surely it's all right. Surely it's good. But the perfect Father has a right to say no. And by the grace of God, we say, okay, not my will, but yours. So there's a question. Think about it. Pray about it. In what area of my life is my perfect Father saying no? And then, am I making enough of my relationship with my perfect Father? He's made it possible. He's called me. He's loved me. He's given himself upon the cross for me. He's opened up the door into his heart. A beautiful, glorious, rich relationship. My dad died quite young. He was in his 50s. And I was sad. I left home when I was 18, and he was a great dad. But I wish I'd been closer. If I'd known he was going to die that soon, I'd have been closer. I'd have told him more times what a great dad he'd been and how I loved him. But I didn't. I missed the chance. And he was dead, died suddenly of a heart attack. Shame, isn't it? If we've got the perfect Father, and yet, you know, the old picture, when did you last see your father? When did I last see my father? couldn't I do something to realize, to deepen that relationship, so that this incredible thing that I've got, my Father in heaven, becomes a living, life-changing, day by day, hour by hour experience. 2 questions. Meditate on your answer. Thank you, Malcolm.